Welcome to our latest game of General d'Armée. We're playing another Waterloo scenario, this one out of the Lardies Christmas Special 2019, which is the cavalry attacks at Waterloo. So we played d'Erlon's assault in the last video, so we're now moving on. This scenario is a bit of a what if. It allows the French to deploy some infantry support to the cavalry attack. And I am feeling a bit daunted. I'm playing the British here and this looks quite a challenge to me, so we'll see how the scenario plays out. The French have got standard infantry brigade here of 5 battalions, then they've got quite a lot of heavy cavalry. I haven't quite got enough for the scenario, but we've got a pretty good representation here. We've got 3 regiments of French heavy cavalry, 2 of cuirassiers and 1 of carabiniers. We then have their supporting horse artillery battery. Then we have the main artillery support for the French attack, 2 foot batteries, 1 of 12-pounders, 1 of 8-pounders. They're in reality further back, will be firing at long range throughout the game. Then we have the rest of the French heavy cavalry assault. We've got 2 further regiments of dragoons and another regiment of cuirassiers. So that's 6 heavy cavalry regiments, and finally on this flank we've got another infantry brigade of 4 battalions. In addition, in support we have the Guard light cavalry. Now the scenario also calls for the Guard heavy cavalry, but I don't have any models to represent them. Let's have a look at the cuirassiers. So we're playing without the Guard heavy cavalry and just have the light cavalry and a Guard horse artillery battery in reserve as well. Now facing off against them we have a brigade of British infantry down here, including the 95th Rifles, and 2 other light infantry battalions, but they are being played this time by my redoubtable 5th Reserve Infantry Division battalions, because I don't have the right battalions for this game. They're supported by a British Light Cavalry Brigade, and in the scenario it calls for 3 British or KGL light cavalry brigades. I've only got the 1, so supporting the Brunswick infantry, which are in the scenario, they're the 3 battalions of Brunswick foot infantry waiting to receive the attack. We're deploying 2 lots of Brunswick hussars. It was a very large regiment, the Brunswick hussars, so at 1 to a 20th scale we can feel that as 2 units. And then we, for the 3rd one, have a very large regiment of hussars here. These are actually Dutch-Belgian hussars, but they're going to be fighting as 2 units of regular hussars to take the place of the British 5th and 7th hussars, I think, who are called for in the scenario. Supporting that, we have 3 batteries. We have a foot battery deployed on the hill here, being watched over by Wellington. And in addition, as we go down the line, we have another British foot battery. And finally at the far end, getting towards where Hayse would be, we have a horse artillery battery, which we may redeploy during the game in support of the British Light Cavalry Brigade. So, as always in the scenarios, the table is not the 6 foot wide that's recommended, it's only just over 4 foot wide here. So the approach moves of the French we'll do with some long-range artillery fire, and we'll do those before we get into the first turn of the game. We reckon, given the pace of the cavalry, the approach moves are about 2 turns worth, so rather than this being a 16-turn scenario, we'll only be playing 14 turns. Objective of the French is to break 3 Allied brigades, including at least the British Infantry Brigade. Alright, we'll be on to turn 1, ADCs. And we'll do we'll execute the long-range artillery fire. Then we'll be back to start the game proper in a minute. Okay, so we're just starting the first turn on the table. All the approach marches have been done. The artillery have been firing away. It's pretty balanced, really. The French batteries have been counter-battering, or performing counter-battery fire, perhaps I should say, and they've caused 3 casualties on this British foot battery in the centre of the line. Otherwise, one of the French brigades, the infantry brigade, went hesitant on its approach march, so that one will not come on table till next turn. Otherwise, all of Charlie's troops have taken perhaps 1 or 2 casualties, but nothing more than that, and they're ready to start moving. So on with movement in turn 3. Okay, so we've completed turn 3 movement. The French attack is starting to come in. The stronger of their 2 infantry brigades is moving up along the side of the woods on the edge of Hougoumont towards the Allied ridgeline, and that's simply protected by this light cavalry brigade back here, while the French heavy cavalry, the 2 brigades of cuirassiers, there we go, supported but not in bounce through range by the regiment of Carabiniers. There we go. Pretty close now. Let's do an aerial shot of the British artillery. The Brunswick Brigade of line infantry have now all formed square in anticipation of being charged this turn. So we move across. The 2nd French Heavy Cavalry Brigade is moving forward, the Dragoons, 2 regiments of Dragoons, and the Cuirassiers. Cuirassiers moving up, supported by the 1st Regiment of Dragoons and the 2nd Regiment of Dragoons. These 2 are periplastics, and Charlie's just spotted one of them's lost an arm. So we'll have to try and repair that after the game. And the final French brigade has just reached the edge of the table, having been hesitant during their approach march. So we'll now start turn 3. There's a panoramic shot. Firing, and we'll come back and let you know how that's gone. Right, we're just about to start turn 4. The firing's completed. The good set of firing from the British foot artillery against the cavalry on the British right flank. So we've unformed and caused quite a few casualties now on that right-hand unit of cuirassiers, but expect to be charged this turn. On the other flank, unfortunately, no casualties were caused at all, or just 1 casualty. So the French attack continues unabated. Somewhat fortunately, their infantry are lagging behind there, so a harder job for the French on that flank, but they're taking less casualties. On we go with turn 4. Right, we've just completed turn 4 movement. The French infantry continue to press forward, and the first assaults of the game have happened. The casualties that have been suffered by the right-hand Cuirassier Brigade require them to halt and reform this turn. However, the left-hand brigade, as the Brunswick see them, have charged up the hill and into the Brunswick square. They passed their charge test and have charged home, so that square could be in a bit of trouble. And the Carabiniers have moved up, providing support to the charging cuirassiers. On the other flank, French cavalry has now crested the ridge, but didn't have any targets in sight at the start of the charge, so they weren't within appropriate distance to know that there were formations behind the ridge, so they've just moved up to the crest of the ridge, and in response all of the British infantry battalions have formed square. So we'll now go on to firing and melee at the end of turn 4. Right, we're at the end of turn 4, and some success for the French. As you can see, the cuirassiers are now dominating the ridge. They are unformed, but they have crashed into and broken that Brunswick square. They were actually unformed by the supporting fire from the fellow Brunswick square as they were charging in. Hopefully I did that right. But even so, they still charged home, and then they wiped out the Brunswickers with ease in the combat phase, having 8 combat dice to only 4. We're now on to turn 5, and the first reinforcements will arrive in the game. So we'll just put those on, and then we'll move on to initiative and ADCs in turn 5. Look at the table. There we go. That's how it looks at the moment. So the French will bring on their Guard Light Cavalry Division, and the British, fortunately, get another infantry brigade of KGL. They certainly could use them at the moment. Right, we've just rolled initiative in turn 5, and it's gone a bit disastrously for the Allies. The Dutch Light Cavalry Brigade has gone hesitant. There were no ADCs able to be allocated to bring on the British reserve, so they remain in reserve. So we get across to the centre, and those cuirassiers who are charging, you can see there's not much opposing them now. Unfortunately, the Brunswick light cavalry, which had an opportunity to countercharge the French while they were unformed, went hesitant. The Brunswick square had retire orders, and unfortunately the second Brunswick square that hadn't been broken was within 12 inches of the table edge, as was, within about 2 millimetres, the foot artillery battery. So both of them have retired off the table. So this part of the front is now really weak for the British. Basically there's a huge great hole in the centre and one reserve brigade holding that whole flank. So the reserves that were going to turn the tide on that side are now desperately struggling to keep the combat going. On this flank, also not great for the British, an ideal time to countercharge, and all the infantry squares have gone hesitant. Luckily the cavalry brigade is at least still active. Whereas for the French, needless to say, every single brigade is active, and Charlie has been successful in bringing the recently arrived Guard reinforcements. There are the Guard Lancers, Polish and Dutch, and the Guard Chasseurs, and we'll look at those in a while, with their horse artillery are now active and come onto the table. We'll come back after movement at the end of turn 5. Right, just completed movement on turn 5, and quite a lot going on. The French columns have advanced up to the ridgeline on this flank, as their skirmishers making way for the 1st Battalion to crest the ridge, and they've taken up positions behind the hedgeline. Unfortunately, as we noted before, the Dutch-Belgian cavalry are hesitant, so nothing they can do in response, and the British battalions remain in reserve. In the centre, the heavy cavalry have moved forward. The cuirassiers have charged towards the Brunswick Hussars, but in a good charge result for the Brunswick Hussars, they've managed to achieve a counter-charge and a charging with a lamb against the cuirassiers, so that may not be a foregone conclusion. Meanwhile, in support of the cuirassier regiment, the 2nd Regiment and the Regiment of Carabiners have both also now crested the ridgeline, and French horse artillery is deployed at the hedgeline. Wouldn't fancy being in that Brunswick square, about to be hammered by the artillery and potentially charged by the Carabiners in the next turn or two. On this flank, we still have the 2nd Brunswick cavalry regiment waiting to be activated. So we move on to the British battalions. Things have gone more mixed for the British. The Dragoons charged the square that is the light battalion, currently played by the Gloucesters, and they threw back the charging Dragoons, who burst back through their supporting unit, disordering it, causing it to become unformed, and the 2nd Regiment of Dragoons have now taken no less than 11 casualties, and so not in a good position, even though the square was only volleying at half effect. It also caused a destiny check, rolling a double 6. As a result, they have got elan, but don't need it. On the other flank, the final French brigade is now pretty close to getting into combat with the horse artillery battery, supported by the rifles and the Hussar regiment. Just pass back along the line, take a look at the field of battle, get on with some shooting, and that critical close combat against the British square. See whether the British line can hold. Alright, on with shooting for turn 5. 5, and things continue to go pretty well to the French. The Cuirassier Brigade charged into the Hussars, despite being unformed and the combat being equal, both having 6 combat dice. Unfortunately for them, they caused 4 casualties to the Hussars, causing 1. So the Hussars were forced to rout off the table, and the Brunswick Hussars are now a faltering brigade. So good French dominance over the centre of the ridge now, with their 2-3 strong regiments of cavalry still in reasonable health. 5 casualties at the moment to this cuirassier brigade. 5 casualties to this cuirassier brigade, and none to the Carabiniers. The square took very few casualties from the French horse artillery, as it was unlimbering and moved during the turn, so double negatives, but they had to go anyway and caused a fatigue casualty on themselves, so no effect, but getting ready for next turn. And over here, French Cuirassier Brigade made good progress. It's in a pretty weak state now. It's now suffered 7 casualties and is unformed just in front of those British Light Dragoons. It did drive into the square and just won the combat, 4 casualties to 3, forcing the British infantry to retreat off the table. But they won't be causing a faltering result on their brigade, as it's only 1 retreat this turn. So good progress from the French. Both of their heavy cavalry attacks have penetrated the line, but certainly the one on the left flank looking in a more precarious position. But the infantry, of course, is about to go in on the far British left flank, and indeed on the far British right flank. But here it's got to go against 2 units of hussars, so perhaps they'll be able to return the favour before the British infantry reoccupy the ridgeline. A couple of critical turns ahead. We'll see how we go as we start turn 6. Right, start to turn 6, and not too bad for ours. Unfortunately, the Dutch-Belgian Light Cavalry Brigade has again gone hesitant, 3rd turn in a row. That's really disappointing, despite having a reroll. The British infantry reserves have, however, been activated. Over on this flank, the Brunswickers in square are hesitant, and the Brunswicker Hussars have recovered from faltering test, and they're just hesitant this turn, and then will be in normal status. Unfortunately, over here for the Allies, all our troops are active. For the French, more good dice rolling. All of the French cavalry and infantry brigade, including the deep penetrating cuirassiers, are active, as are the guard. We're now coming up in support with the guard chasseurs. And on the far right flank, no one's got infantry assault orders, but again, the assaulting French heavy cavalry is all active. We've gone on with charges and firing, turn 6. Right, we're at the end of turn 6, just starting to roll for ADCs for turn 7. Looks a bit better for the British. The French columns have formed square in preparation for potentially receiving an attack from the Dutch-Belgian Hussar Brigade, and did a small volley at the Hussars, caused a casualty. Over here in the centre, both French heavy cavalry regiments charged, one against the Brunswick Hussars, and one here down towards the British in square down here. Both charges recoiled when they hit the square and just did a retire move, so they're still in good health, both those regiments, but they've been pushed back off the ridge. The final French regiment has now reformed and is facing off against some Brunswick Hussars. We'll see what happens down there. And as we move across the line, the French are sort of shaking themselves out and reforming their cavalry for another wave of assaults. So the front French Dragoon regiment is in pretty good health, and that's now reformed. The French cuirassiers have taken 11 casualties, so they pretty much pulled back, won't take any further part in the assaults. And the French Guard are trying to reposition themselves so they can do the next assault up to the ridgeline and against the British. Over here, the French brigade assaulted the gun line, but without infantry assault orders, only one battalion could go in, and the guns managed to do enough casualties to drive it off. So, Allies hanging on resolutely. This flank still looks pretty strong. 2 infantry battalions and 2 cavalry brigades, and they're all pretty elite down this end, and both artillery batteries still hanging in there. Centre still looks very weak as the French cavalry continue to maraud, but the casualties are starting to rack up against them, and the French columns at the moment pinned effectively by those Dutch-Belgian Hussars, although they've been completely useless, not really making any progress on that front. So we're getting to the crunch here. Can this powerful French formation in the centre achieve its objective of wiping out 3 brigades? They're close. The Brunswickers are nearly gone. They've only got 1 hesitant battalion left on the table and 1 cavalry regiment, so they're both at half strength. On this flank they need to take out another British infantry battalion or break that British cavalry brigade. We'll see how we go as we move into turn 7. Okay, so turn 7's completed, and what was going really well for the Allies has swung back towards the French. The KGL brigade has got activated this turn, so it's moved forward and it's done a volley at that French battalion that's just crested the hill and caused a couple of casualties but lost fire discipline. At the same time, the 2 Dutch-Belgian Hussar regiments moved forward. The one on the left, the one you can see here, cleared the French skirmisher screen, which has fallen back, and the one on the right charged the French battalion that was in square. This didn't go so well, and unfortunately they got a retire result, and they had to retire off the table, so we lost one of the the Dutch-Belgian Hussar battalions, regiments rather, so that was a bit of a foolish move by me. Whereas over here the French heavy cavalry brigade has resumed its advance. Cuirassiers are looking to flank the Dutch-Belgian Hussars, and the 3rd KGL battalion is in square as a result. The Carabiniers are swinging round the flank of the unformed Brunswickers, who are taking repeated shots from that French horse artillery battery. They've taken 8 casualties now and are not much longer for the world here. And over here we have the victorious Cuirassiers, who beat the Brunswick Hussars and charged on through, and the Polish Lancers, who successfully charged that artillery battery, which had taken all the counter battery fire, was already on 8 casualties and just got ridden down as the Lancers stormed over the ridge. So the whole centre of the ridge now looks very French. The heavy cavalry really only have 1 weak and unformed Brunswick battalion in place, and we have an English KGL bastion on the right. As we swing back round, we have the 2nd bastion on the left, where the British Light Cavalry Brigade remains in defensive positions, and the other 2 British battalions and the Horse Artillery Battery remain resolute. On the left flank, the one bit of success and highlights for the British is the Royal Horse Artillery, who've had another fantastic round of firing. Their own artillery assault and have pretty much broken a 2nd French battalion. Unfortunately, neither of these battalions are taking quite enough casualties to disintegrate. I think they're on about 10 or 11 casualties each. Still 2 fresh battalions to come, but feeling pretty confident we can hold the attack off on this flank and probably hold off the regular heavy cavalry brigade, but I think we have lost the centre. Anyway, that's the end of turn 7. We'll see how turn 8 goes. Okay, this is the end of turn 8, and the British are conceding at this point. Their left-hand flank is boxed in a corner around La Haye-Sainte. The artillery and rifles and square of the light battalion are all still in pretty good health, but they've lost their flanking light dragoons that were taken off by the Guard Lancers, and they also had to take a falter test as a result of their brigadier having a howitzer shell land on top of him and killing him as the French rolled a double 6. So all pretty isolated here. The French infantry battalions are not in a great shape, but they're definitely pinned in this corner. And in the centre, it really is all over. The French heavy cavalry are dominant. This Brunswick battalion is still hanging on, but it's now got 9 casualties. It's pinned by the Carabiniers, and that artillery battery in a turn or 2 will finally destroy that brigade, and there's no relief in sight. On this flank, the Cuirassiers pretty much wiped out now. They've taken 11 casualties, but they were successful in wiping out the Dutch-Belgian Hussars with a flank attack. So we've now lost the Dutch-Belgian Hussar Brigade, we've lost the Brunswick Hussar Brigade, we've lost the Brunswickers themselves to all intents and purposes, so that's 3 brigades destroyed by the French, and the British have not yet destroyed a single French brigade. The KGL are still in healthy position in this corner, but with just 2 infantry formations pinned in each corner, and the French having complete control of the centre of the ridge, this part of the Battle of Waterloo has certainly gone very much in France's favour. Well done, Commander Neys. Another brilliant execution. We'll see, I might play this scenario another couple of times, see if it still comes out like this. Still feels a tough ask, this one, with the French being able to do a genuine combined arms attack and outnumbering the British with infantry battalions. Tough ask for the British to hold out here. Hope you enjoyed the game, and see you again next time.